In this video, I want to talk about something slightly different. It'll be like a side road rant, so to speak. And it's around normies and why some of us should, back off from trying to hound or harass every normie into understanding and accepting, or worse, self-custodying their Bitcoin. TLDR, it's not going to happen. And I'll start off this video with something close to home, my own family. I've come to the conclusion that every one of us has an idiot in their immediate circle, sometimes more than one, like in my case. And that's okay. Just because you come from the same bloodline doesn't mean you're going to, walk the same paths in life. And I've tried to find a rationale for why this is the case. And, after many hours of frustration and aggravation, it just hit me. So if we rewind a little bit before Bitcoin, before Bitcoin's existence in 2008, where did people with a lot of money store it? Well, some put it in art, some had some crazy wine collection, some of them put it in cars, vintage collections, some of them put it in real estate, some of them put it in gold. But yet no one made a fuss about it, because none of these guys were as passionate about their store of values as Bitcoiners are about money. And it took me a while, to register this. I'm like, think about it. Like, imagine someone who stored hundreds of millions of dollars in art. On a surface level, you think they're nuts. Like, why would anyone, waste so much money on a painting that's just going to sit there and collect dust and require so much maintenance and security upgrades and what have you? But if you talk to that person and they happen to be, an art enthusiast, well, their passion around everything that they've bought will probably align in the same way that, us Bitcoiners do with Bitcoin. They'll tell you who the artist was, when he was born, what he did for fun, how many drugs he sniffed, when did he die, how many people he slept with. They'll tell you his entire life story to the last detail and justify why, all these series of events eventually led to the appreciation of this work of art that to you seems like a waste of money. But we don't hear these people because they don't do this, right? They just understand this, they stay quiet, they make their investment, they store their money, and they live happily ever after. Same thing with car enthusiasts. Like, you might argue, well, they're trying to show off and what have you, but there are some people that genuinely know what they're doing and what they're buying, but they don't go on, public rants trying to convince every single person to do the same thing. Like, I've never met someone talk to me about art, and if they did, maybe I'd think, they're smoking some cheap drugs. Who knows? But that's never happened. And so why are we expecting normies to understand Bitcoin the way we do, right? Like, if we put ourselves on the other shoe, if some guy off the street, came up to me and told me how I have to invest in gold or cars or wine collections because this is going to make me very wealthy or, preserve my fortune, I'd look at him, as a crazy person. In the same way many normies look at us as, lunatics, because while our intentions are pure, their reaction is far from what we want it to be. And so maybe we need to back off, because even though Satoshi did create Bitcoin for 8 billion people, and the fundamental difference between Bitcoin and all the other stuff I mentioned is that one is sound money and one is a store of value and garbage money. But before Bitcoin, there was no alternative. Like, what are you going to store it in? You could argue, okay, maybe gold, but even that has its, share of problems. It's highly manipulated. There's fake gold. You don't know if it's real, where you're going to store it. If you store it yourself, maybe someone will come and mug you or attack you. Like, there's a whole headache revolved around this. But with Bitcoin, the only sound money, it's like it functions on a completely different universe. And so when somebody understands it, it's almost like you want to teleport all your enthusiasm and passion and understanding into somebody else's brain within 30 seconds. And when they don't get it, we take it personally as to like, what's wrong with you? what is it that's so hard to understand? And then we let this fester, which is not healthy. And so I think we need to just take a step back and sort of like not do this, or at least meet folks where they are, on this journey. Many people are aware that their finances are complete shit. They know this because they can't afford anything. They walk into a supermarket and they have a stroke. They go into a pharmacy, God forbid, somebody is sick, they have a heart attack themselves when they realize that half the things on that prescription list they can't afford. So they know there's an issue. They just, for some inexplicable reason, cannot comprehend something which superficially may sound too good to be true, right? So unless you've done the hours of watching and reading and learning about Bitcoin, if someone off the street just came up to you and told you, hey, you got to buy this because it's going to save you from complete ruin, and the dollar's going to collapse and the EU is going to disappear and the end of the world is coming, well, you'd walk away with this guy's got a few loose screws. So it's not going to work. And so you got to let them come to you. When the pain gets, big enough, strong enough, at some point, someone's going to ask a question. And at that moment in time, this is where the conversation becomes a bit more useful, because at least now you're not talking to a brick wall. You're talking to someone who is somewhat more receptive. I experienced this recently with, people that I haven't spoken to in many, many years, folks that I've never thought I'd hear from again. And to some point, I was happy I wasn't going to hear from them again, because they weren't around when my life was blown up back in 2019. And so I put the past completely behind me, and I'm like, whoever, comes my way now must be a gift, because, upon discovering Bitcoin, I not only discovered sound money, but I discovered, a whole new realm of humanity. And so the energy that I surround myself with right now is very different from that of the past. And so I wasn't keen on revisiting, old acquaintances or, people who pretended to be friendly from many years ago. But they're like cockroaches. They're starting to crawl back out from wherever they came from with questions. And so the dilemma becomes, do you answer these questions? Or do you let them go to hell in the same way they forgot about you when, you needed someone to talk to? Right? There's also that personal conflict that has to be dealt with, at least for myself. And it took me a while, to decide whether to respond or not. In the end, I did. Because at the end of the day, your actions represent you, doesn't represent them. And so I didn't want to have negative energy coming out of me into this world anymore. And so I do my part. I educate, I help to the best of my ability. And whether people appreciate that or accept it, that's on them. But my conscience is clear. And I think every Bitcoiner who's attempting to do the same, with the same good intentions, with the same good faith, should perhaps maybe adopt the same strategy. You cannot expect a simple mind to understand what you have spent hours studying. It's just not going to happen. And the more you push, the more you're going to alienate, which harms them, which is, again, contrary to the goal you're trying to accomplish, which is help them out of love, right? So maybe we should back off of normies, because as Bitcoiners, our passion is, off the charts. Bitcoin in self-custody, everyone who's done enough research understands that this is the only way to win. But yet you see a lot of Bitcoiners simping for governments, simping for institutions, buying shitcoins, buying shares in Bitcoin treasuries, investing in all the garbage that the Bitcoin white paper explicitly excludes, because they think this is investing and they're going to make more money in order to supposedly put it in Bitcoin. From the hordes that try to do this, less than 1% succeed. So, again, all this up and down shitcoinery, stupid decisions, that is all part of the journey. Normies have to go through it. I've come to that realization that there's simply no other way for them to learn. In fact, one of my, wishes, so to speak, like if I had this, magical genie that I could rub and make one wish, it would be to give me a button where I can turn off everybody's bank account for 72 hours, just so that they can get a real taste of, what people on the other side of financial privilege have lived through. Maybe then light bulbs will start going off a lot quicker. But of course, that is just a wishful thinking. But at the same time, the day of hyper Bitcoinization, where we're going to get, massive hordes of people flocking into this, can only happen, in my opinion, when that day comes. Whether you get locked out of your bank account or whether they hyperinflate your money to oblivion where you cannot buy anything. Only then will more people start looking for real solutions. And no matter, in how many circles you turn, eventually all roads will lead to Bitcoin in self-custody. The concept of trusting third parties must die. The sooner you kill that mindset, the quicker you reach, financial freedom and just freedom in general. You unshackle yourself from the chains of the past, the lies that you've been told, and your life just magically upgrades. Surround yourself with like-minded people. You may think you're alone out there. You're not. Pick up the phone, call someone. All you need is one person who happens to know another person. And by daisy chain effect, you end up meeting a lot more than you realize. And besides, quality friends don't need to come in big numbers. My inner circle used to be in the tens of thousands before my collapse. Right now, it's a much smaller circle, but let me tell you, the value of that circle is undescribable and there's no price in the world that you can put on it. So, I hope this message resonates with you, and I hope it makes sense as to why I think, some of these efforts to orange pill normies need to be dialed down a little bit. Cool, calm, rational conversations tend to work better. And they'll only make sense when they're open to such conversations. Trying to, shove it down somebody's throat is only going to result in friction and alienation, which defeats, the whole point here. You are acting out of love, but they are seeing it as an act of war. So take with that, as you may. Let me know what you think. Do you agree? Don't agree? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks.